to the Evolving Media podcast, where we talk about all things media, where we are today and where we might be heading in the future. In today's episode, I'm joined by Gavin McGarry of Jumpwire Media, the social media agency he founded 10 years ago. And since then, social media has become a part of everyday life and something you not only have to take into consideration, but also get to grips with and hopefully master in order to reach and engage audiences. Gavin, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so we're going to talk social because that's what you are. That's what
it is. What I am.
It is what you. It is what you are, and it is what you do, and it's what you know a lot of things about. So this podcast is intended for media creators, producers, directors, etc. From any sort of media, but looking forward to in what direction the world of media is heading, and social has just turned everything, on its head. Since social was invented. For me, it still feels like most people don't really understand what social is about. That it's difficult to approach it with something the size of a media project or a franchise or a brand and just assume that it'll work the same way as your own personal social media spheres that you have experience of.
I think that the way that I approach it is to look at the platforms. So let's focus on the platforms. And essentially, whenever there's a new type of platform, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever, what ends up happening is that the platforms are, especially in America, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but here in America, most of the people start using it for sales, right? They start selling on it. That's the marketing people jump onto it and they're like, okay, there's 250 million people on TikTok. Let's go and try and make money. Yeah. Now the algorithms take that over and Facebook is probably the best one. And they're like, if you're going to sell on here, so on Facebook, on your personal profile or any of your Facebook pages, try and use the word buy, sell, or a number. You won't be able to do it. Yeah. So I think that the best way to approach it is to, like the influencers do, is to focus on social media as an extension of your personal brand, right? That's important. You can reach a lot of people that way. And then the next level of is that what's the story? What's the narrative? And people in media, I think we're quite good at looking at what's the story? What's the narrative? Why would people want to see this post? Mm-hmm. And it used to be back in the day, like 5 years ago, that we could just post like 12 times a day and everyone would see it. But now on a Facebook page, for example, only 12% of the people will see it. And for example, Apple has not posted on their Facebook page in a year or something, because what's happening on Facebook is everyone's moving into groups. Yeah. And groups are better because they're better regulated and all that sort of stuff. And if you want to actually reach your audiences, there's two ways you can do it. One, you can do it in a group, or two, you can buy ads. And Facebook is really, really clear about that. And that, for anyone who's older in the media business, is the church and state. So you've got the media and then there's advertising in between that. And Facebook is set up exactly the same way and Instagram the same way. It's a news feed that inserts ads at a certain amount. And you can either, in some cases, you can change the ad. You can say, I don't want to see any more of these ads. And I think that would be my last sort of point in this little area, is that enough people are just too passive on their social media. They don't interact with it enough. And the algorithms now, we think, are about a 9-year-old child. So they're quite sophisticated. And if you start liking a bunch of things, or you start saying, I don't want to see any more of these ads, or you start snoozing people, you'll notice your feed changes, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or even Twitter. You'll notice that your feed starts to change, and what they're doing with the algorithms is they're giving you little tastes of things that they think you might like, but unfortunately, you're basically dealing with drugs. You've heard about all the Google and Facebook employees that have left, right? And they're like, I feel so bad because I built a drug. I'm basically a drug dealer and I want to absolve myself of that with my millions of dollars. That is what we're dealing with here is our drug pushers. That's what these news feeds are. So to bring it back to your question, which is like, how should people, use it, use these platforms, is get to know the platform. We usually say pick one platform.
Yeah.
And then focus on that platform and get really, really good at it. Because, someone who's good at radio might not necessarily be good at making TV or movies or anything else. The platforms are very distinct, and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok are all very distinct. And that you have to take into consideration when you're deciding how much time you're going to invest in each platform.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, in the sense that we talk about social media as an umbrella for all of this, whereas that if you look at how people interact with it and what kind of content there is on these platforms, it's quite different, especially also with regards to what target groups are on these different platforms, etc.
Mm-hmm. We just found out this week there's some new research that's come out about TikTok, and I'm not sure how big TikTok is in Europe, but here in America, it's growing very quickly. Yeah. What's the most interesting thing about TikTok is it's actually quite old. Mm-hmm. We thought it was for 18 and under. In fact, I'm on it all the time, and it seems that, but I have noticed in the last 6 months that it's got much older. And it is, in my opinion, along with Snapchat and TikTok, I believe, are the two best, the most, I don't know how you would word it, but I just think that they're the best platforms, like the best well-designed platforms out there, is that they're really easy to use. The integration of music, it's seamless, all vertical video, all the things that we've been talking about for a long time. And it's sort of, especially for TikTok, you can see how quickly it's growing and how the engagement works. So yeah, I think it's really platform focused. And a lot of people ask us, they're like, well, what should we do? Like, I would say, get someone who knows something about the platform and get them to do it for you a little bit. Everyone thinks that social media is super easy to do. And it is, but it takes time, and it really hurts your brain. Like you have to think about it really, especially, for example, on Instagram, using hashtags appropriately and finding hashtags and following people, and then trying to avoid all the bots, and, trying to make sure that you're not being used by someone else to get to your, it's extremely difficult. And that's why I think Facebook has made a very strong move into groups. And that's why we're telling a lot of people to focus on getting a Facebook group, even if you have a demographic you're going to, which is a little bit older. But we're also I'm seeing like my nieces and nephews who are in their 14, 15, they're coming back to Facebook because that's where everybody is. Older folks are there and the groups are there. So, and also with Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram all as one, we tell everyone spend a minimum of $500 a month, and you will see your engagement and everything across all of your platforms for Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook jump considerably. Mm-hmm. If you don't spend any money on the platform, it will be very difficult to build out. So they are, and I guess that's probably the next point, is that these are pay-to-play platforms. You have to pay to get what you want. Now, some people might be influencers, but those influencers, if you look how they built it, some of the bigger ones are using traditional media. And that would probably be another point. If you can get on traditional media, if you're going to an older audience and you can get on TV or you can get on radio or that sort of thing, then you will find that you build a big audience out there. But it's about finding people who are sophisticated social media users and want to hear your message, and you're right beside your competitors who might have a better message.
You also need to be aware of how conversations are being played out on social media, what kind of interactions there are. As we've seen with our own personal feeds at times as well, it can be a lot more brutal than what people would say to you face to face, and much more direct. And it's a place where you got echo chambers. Mm-hmm. You can find a very comfortable echo chamber to just roll around in and never have to face any controversial or contradicting thoughts. But still, social is more or less necessary, right? If you're a media producer today and you want to reach people and engage with an audience, there is few things that would be better.
I think that everyone would argue you need social media, but what tends to happen is that people are like, well, should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Facebook? Should I be on Instagram? And they're like, well, I should probably be on all of them. And then they're spread really thin and they don't. So our approach for people who are individuals who aren't like companies, we're like, you need to be, pick one and that you think is the best for your whatever your platform is. So if you're doing independent film, you want to be getting into the discussions, or if you're doing independent documentary, for example, that's controversial, you might want to be spending time on Twitter. All the journalists are on Twitter because Twitter went after the journalists about 5 years ago. We set up a couple of newspapers and that sort of stuff, and we moved some of the Twitter journalists over to Facebook. So that's one area. So pick one and do it well. But now we're seeing, it's a much, we have sort of, we look at social media, but we're also looking at digital media. So, what is your SEO strategy, search engine optimization? How are you going? How important is that? How important is it to write a blog of 400, all the time? Yeah, it's important. How important are headlines? Extremely important. They're clickbait level. What are you trying to accomplish? And a lot of people, as you say, what they say online, they wouldn't say to your face. And here's what I think about that. What I think is that most people don't know how to write well, right? I would argue. Yeah. And they say things in a way, or they word it in a way that could be interpreted 3 or 4 different ways. And what we find in our Facebook groups, because we manage some massive Facebook groups around the world, is that we give people a warning. And in most cases, they didn't realize they'd done anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Most people are not trolls. In fact, most people don't want to be seen as a troll. So when they say something, we don't immediately ban them. We're like, hey, did you know that the way you're using these words and that you don't have an emoji, it could be read this way or it could be read that way. Yeah. And I think that is the most important thing. You've got to up your emoji game. You definitely have to make sure that you have a strong emoji game, because if you don't, people will take your reactions different way. Like using LOL, using emojis or abbreviations, for example, as a way to punctuate, to use it as punctuation. It's the new punctuation, right? And most people don't know this. They think, well, I'll just write this way and people will understand. It can be interpreted so many different ways that I think that when you're out there doing these sorts of things, you need to be really conscious of how this might be regarded. And when you start thinking about how many different ways people can interpret what you're saying, it takes so much longer to write something. Everyone's like, well, it's just 25 words, just bang it out. I'm like, yeah, if you bang it out, you could damage your brand, right? And so people are like, what do you mean damage my brand? And I'm like, well, and it's a downward spiral. They freak out, right? That's why you need sort of professionals. And I would probably argue that if you have a little bit of money, is go and find someone who does it every day. It doesn't have to be an agency or anything, but someone on Upwork or wherever that does it every single day, and let them help you with it. Like, you can post, but they can also post. And you may find there's all these little subtle best practices that can make things explode in ways that you just won't imagine. A lot of people are like, well, I don't really have time for video. I'm like, dude, if you don't use video, it's over. Like it's all video now.
I agree. Now, you talked a little bit about not everyone being trolls and not everyone being bots, etc. But a lot of the people you will be talking to aren't necessary people, and I think we're going to see more and more of that in the future. In your mind, how will AI and bots affect how social media plays out?
I don't think we're going to see more bots. I would disagree with you on that. Okay. I think that what we're looking at in America, and this is my personal opinion, this is not, I don't have anything to back this up. I'm just riffing with you here. Okay. What I believe is happening in America is the biggest platforms are Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I would probably argue Pinterest. Mm-hmm. They're all American based. They are all invented and created by Americans. So what's going to happen in America is that the FCC or whoever the regulator is going to start regulating social media platforms, and they want that. Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, they definitely want that. When that happens, these platforms will no longer be open to competition, because it will become very difficult for you to get a license to run a social media platform. So let's imagine that's 5 years out. So that happens. Right now, the way Silicon Valley works is that these people are all based on growth strategy. So it's about getting tons and tons of people on your platform. Whether they're real or not is questionable, but that's how it works. If you're not growing, you're dying. If you're dying, you're not getting any more money. Yeah. So that's why we need the regulation. Once the regulation comes in, then the barriers to entry become higher. These become much more valuable companies. Right. And therefore, that will mean that when where was I going with this? Is that if these companies are regulated, that means that they will need to make a better customer experience, which is a very American thing, and they will have to eliminate bots. And we've seen them do it. Yeah. We know that they can do it. Instagram has done it. They definitely were very, it was very important that they did that, and they did that early on, and they did a good job. Twitter has a massive bot problem that they are fixing right now. You're seeing that it's getting better, and you're noticing that the social media platforms are becoming more robust. There are these laws that are coming into possibly America that stop infinite scroll. TikTok, if you're on TikTok for more than 2 hours, they ban you. Like, you can't spend any more time on it. Same with Instagram. They have these ideas. These regulations are coming in, and what's happening is the platforms are doing it. Most people don't know it, but 2 hours of scrolling. I mean, yeah, that's you would watch a movie. Some movies are 3 hours, right? We don't say, well, why aren't we regulating the length of a movie, right? Is that because I would agree, like, when most people are not scrolling for hours and hours, but TikTok, because it started off with such a youth organization, they're like, no, after 2 hours, you have to take a break. So those are the things that are coming in. And when that happens, I think bots will be eliminated. Because the AI is so good, they're going to be able to tell. Now, I was just at a meeting last night, and this guy who happened to be a Republican, he wanted to troll on some Democrats, right? So he set up a fake account. He set up a fake Gmail account. He set up a Twitter account. He put up his profile, and he started, going on. Well, within probably 2 hours, he was shut down. Yeah. So that shows you that the AI or the platforms or whoever, it wasn't done by human beings, are able to make decisions. It also shows you, and I did an experiment on my Facebook page that you saw. But what was really interesting, it was just about the Greta and the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. I have never on Twitter followed Greta. I purposely didn't follow her. Mm-hmm. My Twitter feed, because what I did on Facebook discussing Greta is full of everything to do with Greta, but and including her posts coming up, because all of these platforms in America, I think for sure, are all connected. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting when you start doing things. That's why what I say to people is, I'm like, if you like to experiment with social media, or I mean, a perfect example is if you're married or you have a partner, get your partner to use your YouTube account for a week and see how it changes. Because these are, if you assume that it's coming from the drug culture, right, of like, if you like this, you're going to like more of this, which is not necessarily true. There could be some argument to say that these social media platforms could insert something that you disagree with, right? They should be able to tell you, they should be able to insert something. So if you're, for example, here in America, if you're a Democrat, they should insert once a week 2 or 3 Republican things. Now, people will lose their minds because we're in this binary world of like, you're either with us or against us, yes, which is clear. But I think that once they regulate it, it's like it has to be balanced. Right. There needs to be more balance, and the social media platforms could lead the way for doing that. And I think overall that 80% of the people are what we call lurkers, and 20% of the people are the people that interact. But what I've noticed from the experiment I've been doing on my own Facebook page is I was a little bit shocked. Out of the 1,024 people that I have on Facebook, for me, that I consider in quotes friends, it's very interesting about how many of them won't interact because they feel that they'll be shouted down by these other people who don't seem to care about other people. But at the same time, I've had a lot of people contact me say, I really love the discussion. I'm not the sort of person that's going to jump in, but it's been very interesting for me to learn more and more about all these things. So I think that, people come back to this whole thing about social media and how people in the media business need to do what they need to do. But at the end of the day, I think social media is really, really positive, and I learn more from it than I don't. Does it get me upset and angry sometimes? Absolutely. Do I think that some people don't really understand how to write? Yeah. Yes. Do I think the education system in the US is broken, being a Canadian here? Yes. But at the end of the day, I think that it's giving me access to people that I never would. I mean, can you imagine, like, in this day and age, right? Do you know right now who the press secretary is for the White House?
They changed, right? But I can't remember who it is now.
Right. Can you imagine 10 years ago not knowing who the press secretary is for the White House? Because that would be the person that would come out and say, this is what Donald Trump says. And he's like, no. I'm going to go on my Twitter feed. And everybody doesn't question. They're like, is this Donald Trump? No. This guy, it can't spell, can't do anything, is mashing into his keyboard. You know it's Donald Trump. We have direct access to our president, right? Whether we like it or not, he is using these social medias to go directly to his base. And I would argue, and I haven't seen any of the data, that because he's very, he's focused on people who are maybe more in the South, or I'm not a super political guy, so I don't really know all the data. But I would say is that there's probably a lot of people who weren't on Twitter, who've joined Twitter, who might be older, just to hear what the president has to say.
Absolutely, I agree fully. So on that note, I'm sensing that if you look at the future of social media, I'm sensing that you're hoping, and perhaps even thinking, that we'll see a more mature social media coming up in the future, and not like this dystopian nightmare of being drugged into stupor via just a lot of bots and shills, etc., and so forth, but something that could actually become even more positive for humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I recently did an interview with a magazine about TikTok, and they were asking me about it, and they said, well, what do you like about it? I said, because I know what it's like to live in China and India. I said, I know what it's like. I don't know the people, but all of the people in my feed that I saw that are doing really funny things are just like us. Yeah. Right. Is this whole idea of like China is completely separate? No. When you go on TikTok and you see all the people and the visuals, I'm like, I can see inside their houses. I see what they're doing. I see everyday life. That is the future of social. The problem has been is that they've all been US based platforms. And now we're getting other platforms like the Chinese based, ByteDance creating TikTok, which used to be Musical.ly. These global platforms are emerging. I think there's a whole, on a side note, I think that, and I'm not sure how long TikTok is for the United States, because they say it's controlled by the Chinese government, questionable. But our platforms, for example, Facebook and that, don't have access to China, yet TikTok has access to America, and all of that data on our kids is going back to China. So there's all these sort of debates. So I'm sure there's negotiations going on and saying, listen, we'll give you access to our market if you do X, Y, and Z. But what I have learned is that I don't see a lot of Africa, right? I definitely see a lot of Asia and Indonesia and Australia and all that sort of stuff. But I really feel on TikTok that I get a ground level view of what people's daily lives are like and what they think's funny. Yeah. And that is a huge step forward. And I guess I would also say is that, it's a very positive time. It's the greatest time ever to be a human being. It doesn't get any better than this. Less people are starving. More people are coming out of poverty. I mean, the 10-year challenge that the UNESCO showed, they said everything's up. Like we have, everything's very positive. And yet our media preys on this negativity. People love to be negative. They can't be negative in their general lives around them, because they'll alienate the people that are close to them. If they said what they said on Facebook to people that they don't really know, to people that were around them, those people would never show up again. True. And that's the dichotomy that we're dealing with right now, is that people go online to vent, right? Whether it's good or bad, that's going to change. I mean, with the AI, I mean, it's leaps and bounds right now. You know that when people are typing things in, the AI is actually able to put it into context now. It's getting close. It's not great. But when you see some of the research that we're doing on, we have bots or AI or software that writes the post for us, if we want to, right? Yeah. I was looking at one yesterday called story.ai, I think, and you put in the first headline, like the first few sentences, and it writes the entire article for you. I mean, that's where we're at right now. And I don't think most people understand that they are being baited by clickbait, by bots. Bots are creating headlines, and the newspapers are using them more than anyone else to make sure that people click because, and I guess this would be my final point on this, is that you have to follow the money. That's why, when we see people like Greta come to the forefront, or we see, influencers jump to the top, we have to ask the question, like, who's making money off this? Mm-hmm. Or who wants that sort of influence? Who needs that sort of influence? And then once you start unpacking that, you will discover some things that you may or may not want to see. But that is the power of social, is that we can get to people very, very quickly. But those walls are going up very quickly. Like now you can't reach everybody. You certainly can't reach all your friends.
Yeah. I would argue though, that people might still realize and know that they're being baited into clicking via the headlines, etc., but they still do it willingly because there's nothing as liberating as venting online.
There's nothing as liberating as finding your own tribe, right? That's what it's all about, tribalism. It's like, oh my God, I found a bunch of people, like I live in the remote Canada and I found a bunch of people that like things that I like hip hop. And I didn't know, no one in my house likes hip hop. I mean, imagine if you're a 14-year-old and you love hip hop and you live in remote Finland like you do, or somewhere in remote Canada. And, most of the people around you all want to listen to, let's say, country music or crazy Finnish songs or whatever, but you love hip hop. And then you're able to jump on the internet and find your tribe. Yeah. And then once you're inside that tribe, you question nothing. You question nothing that maybe these hip hop artists are being paid by large brands to say things that you're going to go and buy on the internet, right? You don't question any of it because you found your brand. You found your tribe. And that's the issue right now, is that these echo chambers, the Democrats really didn't see it like the way that the Republicans did, I don't think. Is that these echo chambers are vast, are large, and are being used by corporations to sell stuff. Yeah. And you have to be very careful. And it's why you need to do a reset once a week about what you believe. Because if you don't, you could be taken down a giant, you could be walked down a path in which you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And everyone, right now is throwing around this idea of science and statistics and data. And I'm like, I work in data every day. It can be manipulated to say a lot of things that I need it to say. But that's the thing in social media, is that if someone writes the right clickbait headline, you're going to click on it. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people aren't reading the articles underneath the headlines. They're just reading the headline.
Absolutely. Who would you say, if you want to start out and find some really good examples, and I'm not talking about clickbait now, and I'm not talking about trying to get people to necessarily blindly join whatever movement you're trying to create, or a group or tribe or whatever. But if you want to look at some I don't know, brands, people, organizations, whatever, but someone who is using social in a really good way, just to get an example of or to get inspiration for how you yourself could be starting out, who would you suggest?
Good question. The issue for us is that we're working 2 years out. Like I'm 2 years ahead of. So it's very hard for me to say what's happening now. We focus 2.5 years ago, we switched over community while everyone was still just posting like crazy on their Facebook pages. We left that alone, reduced the number of posts on our clients' pages because we saw that the algorithm had changed. And we moved to groups, right? And now we're looking at, TikTok or Pinterest, things that people don't talk about right now, but also the resurgence or the power of Facebook. So when you ask who's doing it right, it depends on what their objectives are. Yeah. If you're trying to sell something, I tell my clients, don't bother doing anything but going on Facebook ads. Go on Facebook ads. You're going to pay money, but you're going to get return on investment, and you're going to be able to see it. Or you're going to get a return on your ad spend. Investment's a bad example, but you're going to get return on your ad spend. But you need the groups and the organic social media around it to lift that all up, right? And now you need to be on all platforms, right? If you're a big company, you need to be on all the social media platforms. You need to claim that, right? For sure. But if you're a small person, a single person, like a media operator who might have like a small media thing to get up, you can look at what we do. We have a podcast. We post things on our Facebook page, but we're not religious about it. I put things out on my Twitter, but I'm not religious about it. When I find something interesting, and I think that my point would be, is that the people that are doing it right, and you can find it in every type of country, is that they know their audience, they're focusing on the audience, and they're delivering things to their audience that their audience wants. Mm-hmm. And that seems, in this hyper-focused world, you need to find your tribe. And I think that's probably the best way, for people to move forward in this type of thing, is that you can look at Disney, you can look at Nike, you can look at, big brands, but they're big brands and they have a different ulterior motive. You can look at the influencers. I would probably say, to get good information, go and look at Mashable.com. There's lots of information there. And I think read about those sorts of things. But I would just let everyone know is that you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay, because right now, in social media, I spend all day, every day in it, 12 hours a day, and I feel I know nothing, and I'm considered an expert. Yeah. So I guess what I would say to people is that don't feel overwhelmed, right? Is that just do the best you can, because that's what's actually working. And if you understand the platform you're on and read a few things about how best practices for that particular platform, you should be fine.
It's a learning curve for every one of us, I think. And it's just going to become more of it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, being old, right? I went through radio. I went through TV. I saw the dawn of the internet. I saw, I was first on social media. I've been doing this a long time. I mean, my company's 10 years old. I went to Facebook. I remember going to dinners where people were asking me, what is Facebook, back in 2005? People didn't remember YouTube. No one understood what that is. Now they're everyday. It's everyday life, right? And we're just trying to understand and regulate them. And at the same time, these are private companies that are trying to make money. They're not run by the government. The interesting thing about all of this, and that's a separate discussion, is that other than TikTok, I don't know any platform that's run by the government. And that's what's interesting to me, because in TV and radio, you look at the BBC, you look at CBC in Canada, I'm not sure about in Finland, but they're all run by the governments. And it's interesting to me that the governments have not set up their own social media, that they're happy for private people to do it. Shouldn't the governments be running social media, or have their own social media platforms?
True. That's a really interesting discussion, but we'll have to save that one for next time.
Okay.
Gavin, thanks a bunch for coming on this show, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me.